Hello, everyone. We will start off with the webinar. I'll first introduce our connector and Ms. Mansurah as well. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Connector.pk, I warmly welcome you all to today's session. Connector.pk is an educational initiative dedicated to connecting educators, institutions, and global education leaders to foster collaborations, innovation, and meaningful impact in the education sector. Today's session is part of our exclusive webinar series, which is not merely a program, but a structured one. This program has been created on the foundation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 4, which is quality education, Goal 10, reduced inequalities, and Goal 17, partnerships for the goal. Through this program, we aim to strengthen global partnerships, promote inclusive and equitable quality education, and encourage knowledge exchange among education professionals across borders. Each webinar is carefully designed to address relevant and contemporary themes that support educators in navigating modern-day challenges. Today's topic, assessment patterns for modern day students, is both timely and essential as assessment practices continue to evolve in response to changing learner needs and global educational standards. It is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Ms. Mansurah Arowosekila. Ms. Arowosekila is a highly experienced education professional with extensive expertise in school inspection, teacher development, and educational consultancy. She has served as a school inspector and has worked closely with education authorities, supporting quality assurance and institutional improvement. In addition, she is an accomplished education consultant with international experience in mentoring educators, leading professional development initiatives, and promoting evidence-based assessment and pedagogical practices. We are truly honored to have her with us today. Without a further ado, I would like to give the floor to Ms. Mansurah Arowosekila to begin her session. Please, Ms.
Good evening and assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Mashallah, I think it's a bit more than what I am. I think it's a pleasure to be invited here. I truly appreciate the invitation and the trust to be here with such a wonderful audience. With that said, I also appreciate that we have amongst us a wealth of knowledge, professionals, a wealth of expertise, and I hope that this session is not merely me speaking at you, but is more a discussion, a collaboration, a sharing of ideas, the good practices, the challenges that we have. So let's keep this session lovely, light, formal, semi-informal, where we can share the wealth of experiences amongst all of us. Okay, so as was highlighted, I currently work for the Ministry of Education here in the UAE. I've been in the UAE for the better part of 10 years now, and I've been, well, through the education system in the UK prior to that, and we've worked with Ofsted, that's the inspection systems in the UK, and now I work with school inspections here at the Ministry of Education. I also do some part-time consultancy, and I'm just a lover of learning, a lover of big questions, and a love of collaboration, really. So it's a great delight to be here with you. Okay, so I'm curious to hear from some of you, what do you think? What comes to your mind when we hear the word assessments, and also assessments for the modern day learner? What does that mean to you? I'm curious to hear. You can type your responses or feel free to unmic yourselves. And I guess another question on top of that is the question of, I would like for you to finish this sentence. The sentence being, the future of assessments is. the future of assessments is, what is that? Please type your responses. Thank you, Dua. Evaluations, yes. Evaluation feedback. I love that. And I'm wondering, there's feedback, and I don't know if anybody knows of another nuance where some people might hesitate to use the word feedback and to use another word. Yes, to gauge whether lessons have been delivered. Quality. The future of assessments is quality assessment of feedback effectively. Okay. Yeah. Effective feedback. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So some people, we still use the word feedback, which is still very plausible, and I will be using those words. We also use the word feed forward. I wonder why, but we continue. To facilitate and fill the learning gaps. I love that. Thank you, Farah. And I wonder if I can get all my questions up, because they come up and they disappear. So let me see if I can see the. Okay, I'm unable to see all your questions at the moment, but thank you all your responses at the moment. But thank you so much. To evaluate or to judge something. Thank you, Isra. Okay, reflection on that and learning. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting, and I love this, and you're absolutely right. But actually, a lot of these responses are responses on what evaluation or assessment is for the student. But how about on a meta level, on a macro level? What is the purpose of assessment and evaluation? How do we use that? Just food for thought there. Okay, yes, it is a measurement. It is a measurement of skills and knowledge. Well, we should hope carefully designed assessments are a measurement. So I'm curious, what does that look like for you? What are you doing to ensure that your assessments are assessing the knowledge and skills and understanding of the students, are filling the gaps? And I think what is amazing here, I don't usually post actually, and I need to post more. But at one point I was doing some research and I realized that knowledge is in abundance here. Knowledge is at our fingertips, especially in the age of AI. So is knowledge even, what's the worth of knowledge if we don't act upon it? How much do we truly know unless we act? Just again, the big questions I love to ask myself. And then, if knowledge is so abundant, how do we, at our fingertips, where we can ask ChatGPT all the questions to do our assignments, how then do we validate this knowledge, that the student has acquired the knowledge? What assessment procedures have we evolved into having for today's society? Some of the questions, and I hope we can answer them. If anyone has any comment at this point, feel free to unmute and share. This is a collaborative discussion. Effective questioning, absolutely, absolutely. When I hear the word assessments for today's, for the modern society, I see assessment that is instant, personalized, and of course relevant, that pushes my thinking. Okay, but definitely personalized, and also tests my application of my knowledge. Yeah, timely. Thank you, Farah. Okay, assessment should test my application of this knowledge, because again, what use is this recall when we can get it at the tip of our fingers? Now the question is, how do I apply this knowledge? So are your assessment systems designed for students of today who can access ChatGPT and other AI models? Are your assessment systems now have they evolved to support our students? In what ways have they evolved? Has anybody got any responses? A little bit. In how? Tell me, Benin. I'd love to hear. We would all love to hear, I think. Hello, Chihira. Do you have something to say?
Yeah.
Hi, Chihira. Okay, I think you accidentally yourselves. I don't have the mute function. If admin can help me there. Okay, so Benin said we usually take formative assessments in the form of quizzes. Yes, okay. But I'm curious now, we also need to go back to the point of assessment. If students can have answers at the tip of their fingers, what are we assessing and why? Yes, I do believe in daily observation, thank you. A proper questionnaire with feedback to improve, absolutely. In a few assessments, I've observed that real life situation is given to learners to describe with their own point of view. That sounds like effective assessment to me. Thank you, Dua. I appreciate that. Interesting. And absolutely formative assessments. Has anybody heard of assessments as learning? Let's see your comments now. Yes, okay, awesome. Somebody says, I saw the word critical thinking, IFRA. We should assess students to understand their critical thinking levels. I agree. Okay. Right, Wilder, you've heard of assessment as learning. Would you mind sharing your understanding in the chat? Okay. So yes, what's important when we think about assessment, as some of you have mentioned, is validity. For example, validity of assessments. How valid are they? How reliable were your assessments? How in line and aligned are your assessments? Do you triangulate your assessments? Are your assessments suited to the needs of all learners? I don't know if you've seen this meme or cartoon that you cannot use the same assessment for a different person. For example, I cannot use how far you can swim, okay, and use that for a fish and a monkey. That wouldn't be fair. So how are you ensuring that your assessments are fair and inclusive? Big thinking questions, and really that's always the favorite part of my sessions, the questions that make us think. How are you ensuring that your assessments are inclusive, valid? How are you triangulating your assessments? Yeah, can and should assessment be differentiated? Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we talk about standardization of assessments as well. Okay, active learning or flipped classrooms. Right. Higher order thinking questions. Yes, absolutely. Right. And we know the famous taxonomy, the Bloom's taxonomy, which would aid in making sure we are asking those higher order thinking questions that help us to create and apply, not just recall and understand. We need to go beyond that now. So thank you very much. Open-ended, absolutely. Absolutely. Personalized, reflective, and open-ended. I agree. Okay. So, and then when we hear the word assessments, what also comes to mind is data. And when we hear the word data, we often wonder, because we ask our students or our schools when we go to inspect, we need your data, and obviously the data from assessments. And a lot of schools will give us the data, but then how have you interpreted that data and used it to inform your instruction, to inform your curriculum, to adapt your teaching? Something again to think about. And again, it's so critical and so crucial that this data that we get is obviously correct and it reflects the students' true knowledge, and that data is not inflated. A lot of the times we go into schools and we find that the data is inflated and therefore not accurate, and people do not understand the unintended consequences of that. We need true data that reflects what our students do so that we can inform and tweak our practices. We also use this data at a national level and at a global level. I'm sure you've heard of TIMSS and PISA. This to me is the Olympics of school assessment, because it determines how a country, at a country level, how a country is performing globally. So it's important that our assess, and then interesting, what's fascinating about that process is that not only does it inform what is happening at a global level, at a country level and a global level, that informs your policy. So it is imperative that your assessment data is reliable and is accurate and is a true reflection. But the problem today is, do our current assessment systems, are they in touch with the needs of today's society? And how can we ensure that they do become that? Oh, look, I love what you've said, Ifra. Thank you for this. Assessment data many times don't do justice to pupils' abilities, considering the fast changing world. I absolutely agree. And it's up to us to decide how we can ensure that it does do justice. Now, there are a couple shifts that are happening, I should hope, with assessments. Assessments used to be a recall-based system, and hopefully by now we have moved from recall to what we call cognitive depth. Assessment should be designed to prepare a child for the competitive world. I agree, and I think it's unfortunate that the world has to be competitive. What do you think, Rosina? I wonder if we can make it so that it is no longer competitive. Thank you. They must be learner focused. Absolutely. So we're moving, hopefully our assessment systems, your assessment systems are moving from recall to cognitive depth. And we know that we can do that by applying high order thinking skills, just like you said. Also, again, what we find when I go in to inspect schools and report on what schools are doing is that of the weaker schools, we find that assessments are solely focused on what the calendar says. It's an event, it's something that happens, as opposed to something that is continuous, something that informs. A lot of failing schools just keep it as assessment of learning. Okay, so as some of you have mentioned before, assessment for learning and assessment as learning is what we need to do more. Okay, I'm glad to see that critical thinking skills are now inculcated, because that's important. Assessment should not take place. Learning is a continuous part. Why we restrict it? I agree, Benin. Thank you so much. Again, it's continuous rather than an event that happens at the end of the year. Are schools still doing that? Unfortunately, I find that some schools, the weaker schools, still do that, but hopefully that shift will be happening very soon. Okay, so the shift again is no longer recall; it's now cognitive depth, as we've mentioned. It's now no longer a summative event that happens at the end of the year. It should be now a continuous feedback intelligence. Okay, cyclical, reiterative. And what else? So assessments previously, and unfortunately still today, are standardized. But guess what? When I think about the question of what assessment looks like for the future, for the modern day learner, it is now responsive and personalized. No two students should receive the same assessment, or should they? What are the implications if assessments are different for each student? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And it also leads me to the question, the intention of assessments. I believe that assessments should be used for different purposes. Sometimes it's to gauge understanding, sometimes it's to personalize learning, sometimes it's used for you know, for it to be student-centered. So there are many reasons as to why we assess, and that needs to be very clear for when we design our assessments. I love this. Project work should be part of the assessments. Thank you. I agree, because it is because you can't have ChatGPT do the project for you because you are the person now presenting and doing the project in real time and over time. Okay, so yes, I agree. Unfortunately, due to time constraint, we just prepared the students for examination. And hopefully, by the end of this session or this week, you, as change agents, will be able to make change in the education world, because you're all educators at the front line of change and reform. So assessment should be like, it must cater to every student's learning, absolutely. Because each individual learns at their own pace, absolutely, make connections at their own pace, eventually. So does that mean we should get rid of standardized learning? Like a blank canvas, we should also give blank papers to students and ask them to represent their understanding of the topic, either by drawing or by writing. Thank you. We should also emphasize on developing students' self-assessment skills. Thank you very much. Absolutely, that is so important for me as an inspector, as a lifelong learner. That's what I want to see. Your ability to be able to step back and reflect and judge yourself. Where am I? And am I where I need to be? And how do I get to where I need to be? Very, very crucial. So thank you. Developing self-assessment skills, absolutely, to make sure that it is benefiting to the child. And that's how you produce lifelong learners. Thank you, Farah. If Farah says there are multiple types of learning, like project-based learning, problem-based, etc., collaborative learning, absolutely. But standardized learning patterns, even today, are mainly theoretical. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, it must be fair, valid, and reliable. Thank you, Mehranas. Right. And we are partners in learning, I agree. Right. So we've talked about 3 shifts so far. A 4th shift that I would like to share. Oh, thank you for your question, Shazane. And I do have a response. I'm curious. I'd love to keep that to the floor. Shazane asks, how to develop self-assessment skills in a child? Love it. Thank you. Share the criteria with them. Absolutely. Ask them how they felt about the learning, how they felt about the understanding, and let them evaluate. And then, of course, not only do we do self-assessment, but also peer assessment as well, which is also useful. But yes. But good question, Shazane. I appreciate that. Hi, Muna. Good to have you here. Okay. So another shift that we're seeing, and I hope that, tell me, are you doing this now? We still face schools, unfortunately, that are still keeping to paper-based assessments. And it shocks me till today, paper-based and handwritten-based assessments. And I think by now, in 2026, we would have evolved from that. So yes, another shift that I'm sure is to come is a shift from paper-based assessment to AI and digital-based assessments. And also assessments that are adaptive. And I don't know if you've come across some of these platforms that, depending on the answer or the response of the student, the question is adapted. Has anybody come across those platforms? And I'm curious to hear about other assessment tools that are being used over in Pakistan. Assessment models. I don't know if you've heard of GL assessments and asset. There's different types of assessments. Please share any assessment tools that you're using, because I'd love to learn more about how Pakistan applies assessment practices. Right, in the classroom, self-assessment can be implemented through simple tools such as checklists and traffic lights, exit tickets. Yes, I love exit tickets, actually, because it kind of ties back learning. Reflective prompts aligned to learning objectives. That's a key word there, aligned. Thank you. Enabling students to the next steps. Wow, thank you. Mahrouk, that was lovely. It's well put. Okay. For self-assessment, we can ask the child to start with a simple reflective questions, yeah. And create situations for them to analyze their own activities. Amazing. And the best thing about it is, for me, is that that's where true learning happens. True learning happens through great assessment. So yes, I agree. By modeling ourselves and using, right, that's another way. So somebody asked a question about how we can get students to self-assess, but absolutely modeling ourselves, going through it. They need to see how it's done. That was a good one. Rubrics, absolutely spot on. Perfect. Think, pair, share. Love it. Okay, reflect on their own learning through self-reflection. I truly hope that in your schools, in your practices, that this is what you are doing, because I can hear brilliant responses, but the question is, are they being applied? Because sometimes that's the pressure. We know what to do, but it is the implementation because of all the other constraints. we can praise the efforts, not just the results. Thank you. Right? And also, it's important for students to share their thinking process as well, because that's what we want to understand, not just the answer. Anyone can Google or AI the answer, but what was the thinking process? How did you arrive at that? That's what I want to know. Oh, dear. I sigh because I see this lovely comment. It's catch 22. Teachers are so busy teaching, assessments are sidelined. And that's my point exactly, Farah. Teaching, so we need to find ways, we are the change agents, so we need to find ways to flip that and make sure that assessment is the heart of the learning. Okay, so somebody mentioned a checklist is given at the last unit in the book after the assessment teacher marks that list according to the understanding of the learner. I agree, that happens, but then unfortunately, Dua, what I see, a lot of schools do that and they don't go back to help fill in the gaps. So let's just, what was the point of that then? How do we use that data? And however, we don't have summative till the middle schools. How will they connect? And appear for board examinations. The transitions will then take time. If we don't have summative till middle schools, okay, I don't think we're trying to get rid of summative entirely. I think the issue here is that we're trying to make assessments part of the learning process at every stage of the lesson, not just every lesson, but at every stage of the lesson. There is a focus on exams, exactly. So you're right. It is an effort that comes from everybody. We need to restructure what we do with assessments at a structural level, at a systematic level. How do we need to change that? Because that pressure bleeds into schools, and then teachers are busy preparing students for the exam, which doesn't always have to be a bad thing, because that tells us what matters, the exams, the questions, the assessment for the understanding, if we use it intelligently. Yeah, and sometimes we fail to implement so many activities. About implementing the tools and effective teaching learning practices becomes a pressure for teachers to facilitate school management, students and parents. What approach can be implemented that ensures kick-starting effective learning in class, focusing more on assessment-based learning? You asked that question, Ifra. Good question, Ifra. I'd love to come back to that. Unfortunately, we have been given a limited timeline for the coverage of the syllabus, absolutely, and preparing the learner for the exam. That is actually the bane of teachers, the overloaded curriculum and syllabus. And that we sometimes do not get the time to fill in the gaps. First, we need to address and remove the fear of being assessed. Thank you. Absolutely. Oh, I really love that comment from students, because that is the hindrance of true learning. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we want to develop a love for learning. That's when learning happens. So yes. And that really resonates with me. Thank you, Farah. Because our objective is to prepare kids for the exams. And should it be our objective? And how do we change that? You can always change that. Yes, we want them to thrive. Yes, we want them to have those critical thinking skills. So again, are the exams fit for purpose is the question. Are the exams fit for purpose? How do we design them to ensure that they are fit for purpose? Okay. Right. So yes, we've talked about shift number 4, which is paper-based to digital and AI integrated exams that should adapt to the response of the learner. And we are hopefully moving from isolated scores to a systematic accountability architecture. Okay. Which essentially means that we don't just look at the scores of the students, but of individual students. We look at the scores as a whole. As a school, how did our students perform at a school level, and what does that do to inform our curriculum and our assessment practices? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Muna. I almost read that students should not be given autonomy, almost. But thankfully you said yes, students should be given autonomy of self-assessing their learning in class. And again, Ms. Muna, I look forward to you being the architect of that in your classroom. How are you ensuring, how are you changing those learning patterns? Unfortunately, in weak schools, what do we see? We see passive learners. Okay, now it's about changing these behaviors so that students are no longer passive, but active learners, okay, and have that autonomy, like you said, and the agency to self-assess. Thank you, Ms. Mona, that's a good one. Right, so moving on. Excuse. Right, so when we look at assessments, a lot of you have talked about the board exams. Okay, so the high stakes, which unfortunately kind of bleeds into our remit as policy and policy agents in reform, and how we support the leadership to make sure that we have ethical assessment and that assessments are fit for purpose. Also, I mean, it's interesting because as an inspector, our role is to come and assess schools. And we are also now in the process of reforming or developing our assessment tools or our inspection tools to reflect the new challenges of today. Yeah. Okay, so our inspection frameworks also need to be looked at. Our school improvement planning, and also, should assessments be part of teacher appraisal? Yes, but hopefully in an ethical manner, not to penalise and not to push students and teachers. Thank you. Okay, so what about the non-negotiables to modern assessment systems? What are the non-negotiables? What should not be happening? I'm nodding. I mean, you're right. The non-negotiables to assessments, I think some people have said autonomy, child-centered learning is important, absolutely. Differentiated assessments, personalized, non-negotiables, theory-heavy questions, thank you, exactly, yes, okay. And also, do we have to wait to the end of the module before we assess? So short feedback loops should also be a non-negotiable, i.e. instant feedback. or, as I said earlier, instant feed forward. Promotions on the basis of results. Thank you. Tell me more about that, Shazane. What does that mean? Is that what the current practice is? Yes. Great point. Exams are a reality, and teachers should be able to strike a balance between active and passive assessment. Absolutely. And promotions on the basis of results. So, should there be promotions based on results, or should there not be promotions on the basis of results? I'm curious. Good one. Sometimes we see the red flags. I have a slide called red flags to assessments, and one of the red flags is over-assessment. And what I mean by over-assessment is, the pen and paper, and you just collect that data and do nothing with the data. That's a big red flag. Any other big red flags? Rosina, thank you. Parents also need to see the results of their child rather than learning. I agree. And I just think that as long as these results are used to inform teaching and learning, that's it. Are they being used to inform teaching and learning? Results depend on what you assess. So promotion should be based on reflective assessments and instant feedback. Instant feedback isn't just about checking understanding. It changes the energy and the direction of the lesson in real time. Yes, I agree. Thank you. We hope. Assessment is about measuring learning as well, right? It's a measurement. That just came to mind, something I don't want to forget. But most importantly, like you said, it should inform your teaching practice in real time. So yes, thank you. And it takes practice, but before practice, it takes knowing your why. It takes knowing the why behind the assessment in the first place, understanding the importance of it, appreciating it. And only when a teacher has that at the heart, which I know you all do, which is why you're here today, because you care. When we do these assessments, hopefully you're able to manage the dynamics of what it takes to embed all these great practices, such as changing the course of direction of the learning. Only a brave teacher and an intentional teacher can do that. Rosina, I love your comments. Students study seriously when they know they will be assessed. Some students, yes. Other students have a panic attack. Other students see it as a measurement of their self-worth. Some high-stakes assessments have caused casualties. So again, we need to reflect back on the effectiveness and the impact of assessments. And yes, it is the mindset of society which needs to change. I believe assessments are important, of course, but how serious is too serious? We want them to take it seriously, but how seriously? hopefully not to the detriment of their well-being and mental health. Thank you, Rosina. That's a very important, that was a tongue-in-cheek comment, but actually very important, so thank you. Okay, so I'm now curious, how do your assessment systems drive improvement? I'll write that down. Wouldn't students understand assessments as something important if we emphasize on lifelong learning? If you can expand on that point, I think I understand what you're saying here. It sounds like a good question. Could you just expand a little bit more, Farah? Thank you. They have societal pressure as well, that they have to perform well. We all want to perform well, but we need to ensure that you're right. We all want to perform well, but then our assessments personalized to our needs, right? So yes, we do need to change what assessment looks like at a structural level. Thank you. Right, we use frequent low stakes checks to grab spots early. Thank you, Hina. Good. Feedback is immediate and specific. Lovely. So students know exactly what to fix. Perfect. Patterns and results. I love that word, patterns. In results, guide, reteaching, differentiation, and pacing. Great comment there. Absolutely. And identify the gaps where the students need to learn or need support. Most students forget knowledge part of the learning, what they learned during school years, just because the assessment was superficial. Or just for the sake of it. If students understand the actual reason of acquiring knowledge and being enrolled in an institution, then I believe the pressurization, yes, the pressure for examination won't be necessary. I agree. Correct me if I'm wrong. I actually agree. Unfortunately, but then it's funny because sometimes some students come in well-intended to learn, but because of the pressure of exams or the overemphasis, the love for learning diminishes. So sometimes students do know, and sometimes they don't. They just know they need to get top scores. Instead of keeping assessment to pen and paper, we should look for different styles and approaches. I agree, spot on, to assess the level of understanding. Teachers and students both have to believe in assessment, yeah. If students understand how to assess, how assessment helps students to achieve their personal learning goals. I agree, thank you so much. Exactly. And like somebody said earlier, removing the fear of assessments and seeing assessment as your friend. And that's your job. It's your job as well to also help students be not afraid to get it wrong. It's, to think out loud, to not be right all the time. We need to remove that fear and see assessments as part of learning. I agree. I love this part. Kids are not learning because of the love for learning, or just they're learning for the exams and after exams. It's not implemented in their real life. Again, it comes back to the intention and the purpose. Is assessment fit for purpose? And when it's not fit for purpose, this is what happens. Thank you. But most students prepare for assessments through rote learning. How can we introduce students to the learning curve in class? Well, I like your question, and I think I'm curious as to what other responses others might have towards that question. How can we introduce students to the learning curve in class? I think you modeling it yourself, you not relying on rote learning, you asking the higher order thinking skills, the higher order questions, higher order thinking questions. What, sorry, not what, but why and how. Okay. That you cannot rote learn. What's your view? So the quality of questions is hugely important. So as we've established through your comments, we can see that assessment drives behavior. If we assess where it's misaligned, we then drive high stakes assessments that have impact on mental health, that are disconnected with learning, that put fear of assessment. Okay, so, but then if we redesigned our assessments so that it does bring about our love for learning, then we're on the right path. Assessment drives behavior. Okay, that's one key takeaway. We need to make sure that our assessment practices are aligned and that assessment is instant, or assessment practices include instant feedback, personalized feedback. It informs teaching, it supports higher order thinking skills, and is forward looking. Now, I'm curious about whether and how your assessments support problem solving, collaboration, that somebody said earlier, ethical judgment, as well as AI literacy. This, I believe, needs to be implemented at assessment level. AI literacy, because a lot of the times students might turn to AI for answers, which is not a problem. That's the reality. But now, how do we audit the AI? How do we critically go, how do we fact check AI? Do we just take everything for granted? Oh, are we teaching our students to question the responses? So AI literacy is something that is being embedded in our frameworks now. Okay, and I would love to hear how other countries are supporting AI with or supporting assessments with AI literacy. Okay. And another modern assessment tool, like somebody said, is the moving from recall and paper-based to more project-based assessment. So I'm curious, will board assessments be removed in the future? Okay, portfolio of evidence. Okay, oral defense. Okay, well, those were, I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to hear what all of you had to say and share, for us to question, and hopefully it's giving you questions to think about or reflect on. I'm curious as to what you would change if you could change something tomorrow in your school. What would that be? Again, I'll just ask for those who didn't catch the question, if you could change an assessment practice made for your students today, what would that be? And I'd also like to end with the question I started with. The question I started with is, what is the future of assessments? I would like to answer that I believe the future of assessments is responsive, adaptive, meaningful, personalised, evolving, intelligent, AI supported, and humane. That would be my response, given all the things that we've discussed today. I'm so grateful for your contributions, and I really hope, because you are the change makers at the front line, you can make that difference. And I really hope that you go home with questions, reflections to help you make the change that we need. That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Miss Mansurah. And thank you for your valuable time, your expertise, and for your generous contribution for today's session. We deeply appreciate your partnership and collaboration with Connector.pk. Your insights have added significant value to our ongoing efforts and promote quality education and meaningful professional dialogue. As a token of appreciation, we are honored to present you with a certificate of appreciation for your participation and contribution to this session of assessment patterns for modern day students. Thank you once again, Ms. Mansurah Arowosekila, and thank you to all our participants for being part of today's session. We look forward to welcoming you all to our upcoming webinars. Thank you so much, Ms. Mansurah. Today was a very interactive webinar. It was the best yet.
You're too generous and so kind. I think it's the audience that makes the webinar, and I hope this certificate is for all of us. I'm so pleased and so honoured to be working with change makers, and I hope that we can keep in touch. My LinkedIn is Mansurah Arowosekila. Let's keep in touch. I'll be speaking to Ms. Ismail about how we can do that. If we do WhatsApp call, I think this is a fantastic initiative. Mashallah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Ramadan Mubarak.
Same to you, Ramadan Kareem. Bye bye. Bye everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.